Welcome back to the channel. I'm Kevin, and today we're going to be making new footers for this shed. If you haven't seen my other videos, this is a shed that I moved from a piece of property a couple miles down the road, and over there the township decided that it was a zoning violation. However, here 2.5 miles away, it's perfectly legal. So here it is now, and now that it is here, it needs new footers to sit on. Over there I had 9 piers in the ground, 3 under each skid, and I built it right on those piers, and I'm going to try and recreate that, except a little bit differently. If you see in these form boards, it's got these strips here in the center. Those are the same layout of the skids under the shed, and I'm going to have, I guess you would call it like a 3-inch or 3.5-inch strip footing across the top of those piers, because my fear is that when I pour those piers and then I push this shed onto those piers with a tractor, that when it hits those piers, it might knock them out of position, you know, tilt them out of plumb as it drags across the top. So the most simple way I could devise to get this on those piers without knocking them askew was to make this form board and create runners across the top of them for my skids to slide on, and it'll tie those piers together. And to help you understand that a little bit better, I don't know what words to apply, so I'm just going to show you a quick clip of me assembling it, and then maybe you know, it'll all make sense after you see it get put together. Should be a little easier to explain now. You can see what I'm going for. I've got my strip footings there, 1 under each skid, and I've got them all tuned right into 6 inches each, because that's how wide the skid is. I'm sure somebody will tell me they're not big enough, but it's just a shed. I just need a solid level place to sit it on. So the reason I did it this way was just to save myself the trouble of having to set up batter boards and string lines and try and square everything with Sharpie marks on strings. It's tough. I find that this is just easier. All right, well, now that you're up to speed on this little creation here, let's get these holes marked. I'll mark one in each corner and in the centers, and at each end in the center and the middle one, and those will be my 9 locations. I took the time and squared it up, and I've got it measured out from the property lines, because this time we're going to play by the rules. So I've got my setbacks marked out, and the road frontage is behind you. This is a side setback behind me, so if you can see the edges of the gravel in frame, I'm not allowed to have any structures in the grass towards you or in the grass that way. So I've given myself this buffer zone of about 5 feet just to play it safe, right? I'm not ever moving this shed again. I got my trusty can of paint here, and now that I've got it in place and squared up, I can just mark right inside of my form board. I'm going to have one there, and while I'm at it, I'm going to make reference marks on the outside of the frame so that it'll be easy for me to line it right back up in the exact same spot. I've got my centers, and these holes don't have to be exactly in place. As long as they land underneath of these runners, it's not the end of the world if it's, you know, an inch to you or an inch towards me. But as always, we'll do our best. I'll try and make these reference marks where I'm not going to be piling up my dirt or disturbing it. And right now, it's square with my property lines. And I like that too, you know what I mean? I'm going to get that lifted up, moved out of the way. We'll get these holes dug. 42 inches is my frost line, right? So I've got a 3.5 inch board. That's 38.5 inches. Down there, I might not go as deep. I don't know if you can tell on the camera, but it seems to be about, oh, I don't know, 2 inches lower in that front left corner there, just because I went with the lay of the land, and it does slope that way, which is no problem. I'll just probably keep my hole a little shorter there as to not waste concrete. Well, that was a bit more of a messy job than I was hoping for, but you can see that I've got my holes dug, and thanks to this form board, I didn't really have to do any thinking. Just plopped it down, marked the holes, dug them accordingly, and everything just lines up the way it's supposed to, you know? And that's why sometimes it's easier for me to do it this way, just because it takes a lot of the brain power out of it. You just take your time in laying out your form board. Now I need to go scrounge up some stakes to pound around the edges of this thing that I can attach it to and get it leveled out. All right, I'm back with a fresh set of clothes, 6 foot level, drill, and enough wooden stakes to kill several vampires. So now I'm gonna go find my trusty 3-pound hammer, and I'll probably start in the corners and get those roughly level, and then, you know, put more throughout the middle areas, and we'll get this thing tuned right in. And there you have it. a nice level shed floor. Well, footers anyway. I was surprised to see that in this corner I'm actually up just over 3.5 inches. I was thinking I was going to be up 2 inches in this corner, but 3.5 inches. My eyeballs were out by 1.5 inches. I'll have to get them calibrated. Over there I'm only up a little over 1 inch. Back here maybe 2.5 to 3 inches, and then of course in the high corner I'm tight to the ground. And I think because of the size of this gap, I'm going to go scrounge around in the old barn loft and see what I can pull out for old 1x scraps, and I'll just grab my 15 gauge nailer and plunk scraps down the sides where it's real tall. Over there where it's closer, I'll probably just use some of this sand, but I don't want to put the sand around the holes, so I'll probably just get some of those 1-inch boards tacked around here in these gaps to help hold in that mud, and then I'm going to call it a day. I am ready to pour. You can see now what I was talking about by putting some 1-inch boards there on the heavy spots around the holes, and then I just used the sand that I excavated to backfill around the edges, and that creates a form for the concrete. You can see it in there. And I've had some 5/8 bar with these corners already bent on them that I found in a scrap bin. I've been holding on to those for a while. I had 9 of them, and they were perfect for this, and I'll probably lay the offcuts in the concrete once I start to pour. So I'm ready to go. I'm gonna get the wheelbarrow out of the back of the truck, start mixing bags and filling holes. So it's been about a week since I poured these footers, and I think they turned out well. I'm happy with them. The forms came off easy. They held their shape. I didn't lose any big chips or anything. They seem to have gotten very strong, very hard. I mixed them pretty stiff just because of how wet the soil was. and it's done pretty much nothing but rain since I poured them. So that should be good for the concrete, right? You got to give it water to get hard. And you can see down here how thick they ended up. And some people might say, why didn't you bring that up with gravel to save yourself some concrete? Well, I thought about that, but I was okay with the thickness being on this end, because this is the end that's going to bear the brunt of the weight of that shed. And I did the math on it. I added up all the materials, and I estimate the weight of it to be about 5,400 pounds. You got to remember that it's overbuilt in every way. It's got 3/4 inch plywood on all sides. It's got 4 2x8s per skid. There's 3 of them. 2x6 rafters. It's got 2 ridge beams up there. It's got tongue and groove pine on the inside. It's a heavy beast. And as I'm pushing it up onto these footers, the front half of these is going to bear the brunt of the weight until it gets over to the other side. At a certain point, there's going to be, you know, a tipping point, I should say. And next weekend, I'm going to drag the shed backwards and get myself at least 8 feet here so I can make an 8-foot ramp. And I'm going to try and have like lumber wedges that stick up a little bit higher than these, because I anticipate it sinking in when it gets the weight on it. And I don't want the shed dragging across the front of these footers. It'll probably chip out or crack out here. I don't want that. I'm going to try and get my ramp a little higher than the footers, so when I push up across it, it's not actually dragging on the front edge of this. And I'm hoping that the depth that I ended up here, because this is 3.5 and then probably another 3 inches there, so all of these are thicker than 6 inches out here at the face, and then they get progressively closer to 3.5 inches behind me. It just comes down to actually getting the shed up on them, and I'm a little nervous about it, but we'll see how it plays out. And this stone that I brought in off camera, I went over to the other property and I gathered up all the stone that was around the shed in its original location. It was a washed 6AA crushed stone that I had on top, and I went for that because it was very clean, so when the rain hit it, it didn't splatter any dirt back against the shed. But underneath of that was a road gravel, so when I scooped it up, it got intermixed with the road gravel, so now it's like a blend. It's a very high stone content, but there is fines in it now, so it'll pack in hard. I wanted to make sure I got it in between these runners to give them more stability side to side. You know, because if it gets a little off track, I'm going to have to tug on those D-rings and pull the shed sideways. I'd hate for it to kind of wonk them off to the side, so I'm hoping that these gravel beds will provide some robustness in between for lateral strength. And aside from that, I'll never be able to fill in between these once the shed is on. So I wanted to get that done. I left it a little low on the outsides so I can get another layer of that very clean stone on top. And then once the shed is in here, I'll use the rest of that stone to go around it. And then it'll be time to bring the quad port up to it. But those are all adventures for another video. And we're gonna give these runners another week to cure, get nice and hard, and then we're gonna get that shed up on top. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.